Hi,
Hi.
everybody. I want to say hello. My name's Sasha Graham, and this is an interview between myself and the amazing, incredible, strong, brave, genius author Evie Knight. Evie and I are going to be doing a live Ghost Stories by the Fire chat Q&A, a reading from her brand new novel. So this is just an interview so that everybody can find out a little bit more about her brand new book, which is absolutely stellar. So let me begin by saying that Evie Knight is a Bram Stoker Award winning author. Her debut novel, The Fourth Whore, won the best debut novel from the Stoker Award. She's the author of 2 novels and 3 novellas, including the novella 3 Days in the Pink Tower, which is her most recent work and the reason that we're sitting here talking today. So Evie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So maybe the best way to explain to people who are watching what this book is about and how you and I kind of found each other, especially because a lot of my audience or the people who know me through the world of tarot. I'm going to go ahead and actually let some of your reviews kind of introduce you because I think they did a really great job. So, this is from Goodreads. 3 Days in the Pink Tower is an unforgettable work of fiction rooted in the experience of author Evie Knight. The introduction is a powerful statement on ownership of trauma and the reasons behind tarot inside the book. It is a striking and highly personal nature of cartomancy as a key feature, not only as a foreshadowing of what happens to her protagonist, but also as an important aspect in your life. Another Goodreads review, Knight lays her soul bare in this brutal reimagining of her own kidnapping and assault. The writing is sharp and immersive. The frame, using tarot and otherworldly messengers, brings hope into the most terrible places a 17-year-old protagonist must go through. Thank you, Evie, for your story. So when I'm looking at these reviews over and over and over and over again, I'm seeing the reviewers saying, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for writing this. This is a work of auto-fiction, of speculative fiction. Can you explain to the people watching exactly what that is?
So it's basically a take on a memoir of an event that occurred in one's life, so nonfiction, but adding magical elements to it, speculative elements to it, to make it almost like a piece of historical fiction, but it's your own historical fiction. And just sort of reclaiming, the way I saw it is reclaiming the story and sort of rebuilding it almost in a new way, to tell the story in both a true way, but also in an imaginative, entertaining way, to maybe open that experience up to more people.
See, I'm just going to read one more review that kind of like that kind, and I like the way this reviewer said this. The author has bravely taken on her horrifically lived experience of a kidnapping and rape to fuel the story of trauma, leaving readers with a novella of strength, survival, and retribution. She could have written a memoir, but instead she said, fuck those guys and fuck those people who attempt to victim blame. And she took all of that justifiable rage, and I will say also experience, that's my own word, because it's and wrote this book instead. I want to ask, can you share with everybody a little bit about what happened to you when you were a teenager?
Yeah, sure. When I was 17, I was actually just at home by myself. My mom was a single mom. She had just left for work that day, and there was a knock at the door, and it was a man wanting to use our telephone. and there was another man with him in the car, and whoever they needed to use the phone. This was back in like early 90s. So there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't things like that. We lived out in the country, so it wasn't uncommon for people to have car breakdowns. We lived near a lot of farms, so it wasn't uncommon for farmers to come over and ask for like a jug of water or things like that. So it really wasn't anything that I thought about. So I lent him the phone. He tried a few times to make a phone call, ask if he could go talk to his friend, you know, kind of back and forth about maybe he was calling the wrong number, etc. And ultimately said, well, I guess I can't get through, hands me back the phone. When I turned around to walk back in the house, I turned back around, he was right behind me with the gun, and basically said that they needed money and they were looking for money. And you know, like I don't know if other people have a lot of money just lying around their house, like, oh, here we go, here's, you know, here's my money drawer. So I didn't, you know, and I was 17. I'm like, I can't get you money. Like, where am I going to find you money? So, you know, gun to you changes a lot of your thought processes. And at that time, my mom and dad had split up, and my dad lived just down the road. So I told them he'd be home from work later in the evening, and that I could potentially ask him for money. Just tell him, you know, hey, I really need a little money. And I said he would probably give it to me. In which case they said that was great idea, but we couldn't hang out at the house and wait for him because you know, people might drive by and wonder why I had all these strange cars at the house. And so I had to go with them. And so they took me away in the car and drove me to another county, to a hunting cabin that one of their uncles owned. And from there, for the rest of the evening, they kind of just took turns raping me and threatening to kill me, and ultimately decided to drive me home, and drove me home. And the one that had pulled the gun originally, when they drove me home, walked me back in the house, made me strip off my clothes, put them in the wash, watch me, you know, wash my clothes, made me get in the bathtub, made me wash everything, watched me do that. And then said they would be watching me for days to make sure I didn't tell on them or turn them in or anything. And then he left. You know, later on, I found out that he told his friend that he had killed me when he was in the house and not to worry about it. Everything was fine. That was the plan, apparently. But he didn't. And then his friend obviously drove by later and saw that my car wasn't there, and thought he got into some trouble, told a friend. That friend turned him in, and then he turned his friend in. So
are they in jail?
One is still in jail, but that's on other charge. Like they were looking a total with all their charges from this, they were looking at about 52 years. They got they were for sure in for 7 before they were up for parole. So out of the 52, they got 7. And I went back and did, you know, fought the parole, kept them in for 10 years. And then they got out. The one continually broke his parole, violated his parole, and was back in all the time. And the other one, I don't know. I've lost the time. And, you know, there was so for so long, I would get like victim updates on where they were. And, you know, if they were back in jail, I was allowed to know that. But once they're out and not going to jail anymore, then I don't get any more updates. So I only know the one is in and out of jail all the time, but the other one, I don't know where he is. Yeah.
When did you start work on this novella with the intention that it would maybe become something that you would actually publish? And were you writing about the experience just on your own in order to kind of understand?
Mm-hmm. I had written about it a few times. I had written a couple poems back in my early 20s about it. And so I had a little collection of writing, little journals, things like that I had written. And I think in my 20s, probably told myself, maybe someday a memoir, you know, maybe someday I'll write about this. And as as things started changing in politically in the United States, and the Me Too movement and things like that started to take hold, it was getting into my thoughts again more and more. And then this past June was the 30th anniversary. So thinking about that big anniversary coming up, really had me really thinking more and more about it. But at the same time, the whole thing was, why does my story mean enough to tell? Like, when the Me Too movement started and you would look out and you'd see it would seem like every woman has had something. Every single woman has experienced some sort of harassment, trauma, assault. So what was the point of me telling my story? Like, what did I have to say that a million other women haven't heard or haven't experienced? And so that really was weighing on me too. Like, why should I do this? Why would I do this? What can I get? Both, for myself, what kind of closure could I get for myself by telling and sharing it? And what could I do for anyone else by sharing it? And so the idea of maybe sort of taking it and molding it into a new story and telling it from sort of an outsider's perspective and changing it and adding some magical elements. And as I started thinking about that, I realized, oh my God, this is actually my story. Like, I own this. I own everything that happened to me. And if I want to change it completely, I can. And if I want to change the ending, I can. I don't have to deal with the trial anymore. I spent my entire senior year going to trials and therapy. And, it was my high school senior year. And instead of, hanging out with my friends, I was, taking days off of school. I was barely passing, calculus class because I couldn't keep up with the work while I was trying to go to trials in 2 different counties for 2 different people. So I didn't need to do all that. Like, I could definitely do it my way, and the more I thought about it, the more I knew I wanted to do that. And then it was a matter of how do I do this? And that's when I happened to be reading your book and came across the quote that, that tarot is storytelling. And that's, what it really is about. It's about telling a story and realizing that I could use that in a way to tell my story too. And so as soon as I started looking into that and putting those elements together, it just kind of all really truly just fell together perfectly. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do with it. So
it is such an extraordinary story, and it is part of the complexity and kind of, I think, the emotionality of reading it. And it's something that some other reviewers have actually also even spoke to, is that you're such a good writer that it is incredibly entertaining, but it's entertainment based on one of the most horrific thing that could ever happen to a person. And I think that on so many levels, it's also what makes it compelling, because nothing in life is black and white.
Right.
And the way when you do story tell, right? When you do grab hold of your own narrative and move into it, there's a depth, right? And a richness. And I think, did you discover things about your experience that surprised you as you moved deeper into the telling of the story?
Yeah, I think for me, it was interesting that once I started using the tarot and started looking at the cards that I wanted to use and what they said, and really, again, back to your book, the idea that, you're looking at the pictures on the cards and you're finding the symbols that are speaking to you in that moment, and realizing that even the spread that I picked for her in the beginning, how it evolved with her story, and sort of realizing so much about myself as I went through that as well. So as I was sort of guiding Josie through it, I realized how much of myself changed, like the tarot, as I went through it as well. So I was like realizing a lot of things about myself, you know, like I told people all the time that it was sort of like my soul curled up into a fetal position in my brain and let my body take over. And while I think that there is some truth to that, I also think that perhaps there was a lot more of me and some strength and some parts of me that I didn't even know existed that were guiding me through it at the time too. And so it was probably, I mean, I've been through a lot of different therapy and a lot of different read a lot of different books on just trying to get through it. And I don't know, this is one of the best pieces of therapy I think I could have ever done for myself, because looking back, you know, at this child that I was and how much I grew in that process of what happened to me, and then where I'm at now and what I took from it has really made me realize, you know, I don't know, just how strong of a girl I was when I didn't realize it. Like, I don't think I knew that until just recently. Like, oh my gosh, you this is a lot you took on, and you survived, and you made it through. And I never gave myself that credit before. And so being able to lay it out and look at it all and seeing that there really were some strong parts of myself, you know, I really did have that high priestess within me to guide me through. So
I think one of the things that people who have not suffered assault, rape, trauma, one of the things that is hard for people to actually understand and recognize is that it's almost as if there's a double trauma inherent when it's what happened to you as you're experiencing it. But then in order to do something, to bring justice, to right the wrong, to put dangerous people behind bars, you have to come out, right? You've already suffered the experience. Now you have to come out. You have to tell adults about it, which when you're a child, a teenager, I mean, at any age, it's mortifying to talk about the most vulnerable parts of yourself and your soul. And you have to tell the story again and again, and again. And in your case, did it get press? Was it in the public as well?
Absolutely. It was in the newspaper. I went to trial. So, you know, and of course my family are there. They want to be there. And I got to get up on the stand and say, you know, I put a man's penis in my mouth in front of my mother. You know what I mean? Like it was horrible. And I remember one of the very first hearings, because there was like a preliminary hearing and then there would be a trial. And one of the preliminary hearings for one of the guys, he had an older gentleman as his lawyer, and I don't know if he did it on purpose or if it was because he was older, but he would just constantly be like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you repeat it? Could you say that louder? Could you say that louder? And so it was just repeating these. And again, for a 17-year-old girl to be saying the things that you had, you know, and they'd just be like, can you be more specific? You know, did he put his fingers inside of you? Did he put his fingers in your, you know, your anus? Did you, you know, all of these things. And you're just like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And my mom and my aunt, my grandma are all sitting out there, you know, in tears. And I'm like, I'm sorry I did these things, you know, like, please don't think anything of me, you know. And you're looking at your mom thinking, my mom will know this in this image in her head for the rest of her life, you know. And it was really hard. One day, the preacher from my grandma's church came, and I see him back there like, oh my God, what is, like, all these people that I don't ever want to know any of these things about me are sitting there. So it was. And then, you know, you go to school and everybody's like, oh my God, do you have AIDS? You know, are you pregnant? Because it was a big thing. I mean, 92, like, do you have AIDS? Do you have to be tested? And which I did, by the way, because that's their right. You know, it's their right to not have to be tested. They can say no. They don't have to be tested. So I had to. So every 6 months for like the first 3 years, you'd have to go in and take an HIV test, because they don't have to do it if they don't want to. So if you want to know, you know, and so all these things that, you know, all the rumors that go with that at school, and all the questions and all the looks and everything that all goes. So it is like traumatizing, vicious cycle over and over and over.
But I think that that's something that Me Too and just being able to talk about the most, put my daughter's word on it, cringy, and I don't need to make it smaller by using a word like cringy,
but
oftentimes the more you're able to speak about it, the less stigmatizing it is. So when you can say words like penis, vagina, this, that, any other thing, and it's not weird because we're not living under a context where good girls aren't supposed to be doing things like that, then it becomes something that the entire community can talk about and not be filled with shame. And therefore, it's not so hard to talk about sexual abuse and sexual trauma and rape in instances. So, you know, I just, again, I want to commend you for your bravery and also, but just being part of the solution, you know, being part of creating, taking something, the worst thing that could happen and making space around it, not only for other people to be seen and feel like that they could be a witness to you and you for them, but also just in the evolution as the way we all deal with this, you know, as a country moves forward. Now tell me, were you working with tarot beforehand? Were you actively pulling cards from time to time, or?
So I absolutely have always been obsessed with it. The artwork that is involved in tarot, and then the way the different artists interpret the tarot has always been this thing. And I love going and getting readings done. And I tried to learn it so I could do readings myself. And, you know, I would pull them and then I had to pull the book out. And so it was really, again, I know this sounds like I'm fangirling you, Sasha, but like your book just really, for the first time, made me feel like it's completely accessible to anybody. The tarot is completely accessible. Because the first time you were like, stop trying to memorize the meaning of the card. Like, look at the card and what does it say to you? And what do you feel when you look at it? And I was like, whoa, this is huge. So I was really into doing that and like looking at these cards and like just buy decks all the time because their art calls to me. And so to like start pulling out the same card in all the different decks and just kind of looking at them and learning it that way was for me like, oh, like this light bulb that came on, like, oh, I could learn it this way. So yeah, I feel like I'm just at the beginning now because finally I don't have to memorize the meaning as much as it is just kind of learn it from what it means to me. And so I'm getting there. I'm nowhere near. Like, I don't know that I could do it for anybody else, but I feel like I could pull and do my own readings, you know, for myself.
It's a never-ending thing, right? Like you're never at the end. Like, and I always say, like, anybody who sits down with their cards, if they think they already know everything, there's no point in even doing a reading, because we do tarot to reach into the darkness and the shadows, to find out what we don't know.
Right.
You know, it's a cult paranormal horror, but like it's that kind of thing that I think that tarot readers and psychics, and I think in particular horror writers, you know, and paranormal fiction writers it is a space that is very comfortable and it is very spooky. To me, it is one of the most powerful places that a writer or an artist can inhabit. Because we brush up against, whether we're reading tarot or writing a novel, we're brushing up against archetypal energies. We're brushing up against things that haven't maybe quite manifested in this world, right? So when all the rest of, I always feel like when the rest of the world goes to hell, you know, the quote unquote normal people, you know, come running to a reader, they might go running to a horror author because you're kind of there in the shadows saying, it's okay. I've been in the dark and I can guide you through, you know, and I think a great work of fiction, especially horror fiction, always reveals something to readers that is true and that they haven't seen before. And that's why it's so incredibly compelling. And you've obviously, mastered that art. But can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? Have you always been a writer, and was it kind of like, were you wrestling to get your first work of fiction up and out of you, or did it feel like a fairly seamless, natural evolution?
So I've always wanted to be a writer, always. I think it was sixth grade. I mean, always gravitated towards the darker stuff anyways. Even as a little girl, my grandma read me Grimm's Brothers fairy tales. And those are dark, they're not exactly like your happily ever after fairy tales, but I was just fascinated by them. And so I've always kind of gravitated towards that. And then I think it was in sixth grade that I picked up my first Stephen King novel. And I was just like, whoa. But not only was I fascinated by the stories he told, but it was the way that he told them, the way he could put words together that made it just like, I could not put the book down. That's how I knew, like, I want to do this too. Like, I want to create art with words, because he did it I just love the way he puts words together. So all my life I was like, yes, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. So when I decided that could I make time in my life to write, I decided that for 1 year, I would write something every day for a year. And if I could make time to write every day for a year, then I would know that it was time to write a novel. So I did this little like experiment. I made a blog. I did a blog kind of like the Julie and Julia thing, where it was like, okay, I'm going to do something every day. And I found a book with 365 prompts, and they were all horror prompts. So I just went through that book, and I was about, like, I don't know, maybe like a month in, and the author of the book, it was Mike Arnzen, emailed me. It was like, hey, I saw your blog, I saw what you're doing, like, and just like wanted to cheer you on, and can I interview you for my blog to say that this is what you're doing with my book? And I was like, yeah. So we kind of developed this little friendship, and then I found out he was a professor at Seton Hill's writing popular fiction master's class, like course, MFA. And I'm like, I wonder if I could fit that into my life. So he was very encouraging about it. And it's a low residency, meaning, mostly online, and you go once a semester, you go for a week and do classes there. And then I'm like, yeah, I can do this. So I did that. And part of that program was, you have to write a novel. That's your thesis. You write a novel. And so I worked on my first novel for a while. And it was my first semester there. It was going in one direction, completely different than where it ended up. And then that was the year, I'm going to get a little political. That was the year that Donald Trump won the election, and then the Women's March. And I went to the Women's March, and I was really distraught over how things were going to happen for women. And what was going to happen, and in the Women's March, I march, and talking to people, and watching things and interviews with women about like what's our future look like now. I kept hearing about Lilith, who was in some mythos the first wife of Adam, and how she refused to submit. And so she was kicked out of the Garden of Eden and replaced with Eve. And I was like, oh yeah, this is my girl. Like, I got to write about her. And so I scrapped everything I'd written so far from my thesis. I threw it all away, and I was like, I'm going to write about her. And then in the middle of that, I went through this horrible divorce, and so it worked out well, because there was a lot of anger and frustration and confusion in my life. And while it took a little longer to write that book, I was able to kind of use all that and put it into this already very angry character who was, come back from getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden and being like, I want revenge. Like, I'm just as equal as anybody else. And so I don't know if it would have been as good or successful had I not been through all of that I went through. So it took a lot longer because of those things than I wanted, but those things made it what it was. So sometimes, I mean, that's what I tend to when I want to write. It's usually about something either that I've experienced or I've watched someone else experience that has made me like, I need to tell this story in a way. And that's kind of how I start. And then I just kind of try to get into that mindset and thought process. And sometimes it goes really fast. Like Children of Demeanor, my second one, went a lot faster because I kind of wanted to think about, being I was getting older. And so thinking about that whole change in life and going through menopause and how we're kind of evolving in a way, but also it feels sometimes as a woman like you're devolving, like I'm losing all the things that make me. And so, I wanted to play a little bit with like evolution and then also devolving into like lower characters and creatures. And so that one came really fast because it was just sort of what would happen if this, a house made you devolve into like lower creatures. But sometimes when the more emotional, the longer it takes. So the fourth whore and the Pink Tower took a lot longer than, just because I really had to soul search. And there were days where I had to just walk away because it was too much for me that day, or I felt like, am I being honest? Am I being truthful? Am I being true to the feelings that happened at this time, or am I making entertainment out of it? So I struggled a little with that, with the Pink Tower, especially, like, am I being true to what happened, or am I playing this up, and there were times where my husband had to keep saying, you are not Josie, you are not Josie. You are helping Josie through something that she's going through, and this is her experience and not necessarily yours. You're not lying if you change the ending, that's her ending, not yours. And so it was really emotional because like I just felt this kinship. She was me, but I just had to remember she was a different version of me in a different dimension, kind of a thing. So
I think that's just, it's so people will often say, right, where do you get ideas, right? Where do you get ideas for your books? And I think that so often, I know for me, I'm just trying to figure things out.
Right.
And chances are, if I'm trying to figure something out, somebody out, other people are trying to figure the same thing out too.
Yeah.
So I think it's an extraordinary gift to be able to go and to write and to take such deep dives into all of these things. What is currently on your mind, and what are you working on right now?
So the one thing that I'm working on right now is a sort of, I guess it would be called an addendum to Dracula, in that I wanted to reimagine. Well, first of all, every time I've read Dracula, I felt that Mina really was the hero of the story, right? Mina was the one who kind of had it figured out all along, and the guys are like kind of bumbling and falling into success. And Mina's like, yeah, we like, don't do that. Or, I think he's going to go here. And they're like, shush, you go to bed. This is man talk now. You're too weak for this. And really, I feel like she was the hero all along. And so I kind of wanted to rewrite it and give her a little more power. And then it occurred to me that Renfield was never really a fully fleshed out character either. No one really knows where he came from, how he had this connection, or why nothing really about Renfield made total sense. So I kind of imagined, what if at the time that Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, he had to suppress a lot of the truth because no one would believe that women were the heroes. No one would believe or want to talk about it. And so I thought, well, what if Renfield was a girl too? What if she had hysteria, because hysteria is related to the uterus and bleeding and blood. And so why wouldn't it be a woman, a female Renfield in an asylum with hysteria? And, maybe she and Mina together really figured it all out and saved the day. But the publisher was like, no way, no one's going to buy this. You can't, So I kind of took it at an angle that Bram Stoker had to quickly rewrite. And that's why some of these things aren't as fleshed out. That's why, some of it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the ending feels rushed. And it's because he had to rewrite it because the publisher didn't want the truth, which is women are actually strong and smart and intelligent. And they didn't want that out there. So I kind of rewrote it. And that's what I'm working on anyways.
Amazing. And do you have a publication date and a title? Or
no,
can you share that?
No, I don't. I'm hoping I'm hoping next year. I'm hoping to have it completely ready to go to the publisher by the end of this year, which means hopefully by the end of next year. But it really is just dependent on how life happens and what goes on. And you know, I'm trying really hard to stay true to Bram Stoker's voice as well, to make it sound like these were just things that were edited out in the first place, and kind of and then sort of rewrite Renfeld's background as well into the story. So it's been a little bit more challenging than my usual, just writing it my way versus kind of like trying to write a la Bram Stoker. So that's what's slowing me a little bit.
Have you had any interesting kind of strange imaginings or feelings, like you might be brushing against the spirit of Bram, the energy of Bram? Is that something you like? I went
to the Rosenbach in Philadelphia, where his actual notes are, and I got to spend a day with it. They pulled his notes out, and I got to actually spend a day like almost with him with his notes, and there were just some that really like stuck with me, or almost felt like, yeah, this is, and there would be like, he'd have these little symbols sometimes that he would write on some pages that no one knows what they meant, like little circles with squares around them. Like, what is this? What does this symbol for mean to you? So yeah, like just like pulling those ones out and kind of laying those ones out and being like, what are you trying to tell? Like, what are you trying to tell me? And I actually got to watch an online lecture by his great grandnephew, Dacker Stoker. And I had just kept feeling that in reading these notes and reading about Bram, that like he really was a bit of a feminist. Like he really felt that women were strong and women were smart. And I said, I asked him if he felt the same. And he was like, absolutely. Like no one ever thinks that. Everybody thinks they're sexist and stuff, but I feel like that too. And I was like, yeah. So that was kind of the vibe I was getting right from the start. So maybe some messaging from beyond, but yeah, it was just, I don't know. It was really cool. Like I really felt like I was communing with him in that moment where I had his own writing in front of me.
Yeah, there's something I always find very powerful when the actual notebooks,
right?
The manuscripts, the typewriters, or I was just had the distinct pleasure of walking through William Faulkner's home, where he literally had notes for some of his books written on the wall of his study, and so it's, reading is such an intimate act. Just reading a novel, reading a book. Absolutely. And I always say tarot readers were intimacy junkies. And so there seems something particularly like doubly intimate when you're in a great writer whose mind you've been inside of, when you're actually in their space, walking through the house, looking through the windows they look through, so I think that's exciting. And I think a lot of people think of writers as it tends to be a very solitary thing, writing, right? If you were to go to a college or like to LaGuardia High School here in Manhattan, you've got the dancers and the artists, and it's all big, it's communal, and it's flashy, and not so much so for the writer, but there is an incredible, I think, sensuality that comes through for the work that we do, especially when, because it is our senses that we're relying upon when we're trying to convey and put our words together. So how can people find you? And before I start talking about the event that you and I are going to be going together next week, do you have any other events coming up? Where can people find out about you? How can they contact you, and where can they buy 3 Days in the Pink Tower?
You can buy 3 Days in the Pink Tower right off of Amazon. You can get it off of Creature Publishing's website. You can get it from Barnes & Noble's website. Some Barnes & Noble, I know, carry it in their brick and mortar store, but I know you can get it on their website. And then you can always contact me, because I always have copies, and I can do a signed copy, because I have that as well, and I would be happy to send one to you. And then I am on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Evie Knight Author, and eveknightauthor.com is my my website, which is also usually where my events are, and any anthology, like short story anthologies or anything coming out with one of my shorts in it, or a book, news when things are coming out. But
great.
Yeah.
And I was looking at your site, and it looks like you do a nice combination always of virtual and in-person events. So people really get there, will have an opportunity, like if you're in their neck of the woods,
right,
or just do something virtual.
Yeah.
Well, my neck of the woods, which happens to be Manhattan, NYC, right now, which is where I'm sitting. I'm so excited to invite you and bring you for an author event here to New York City. It's next Thursday, September 15th. This is the first kind of very special one-off author event that I'm doing under the umbrella of my regular monthly event, Ghost Stories by the Fire. So Evie is going to be joining me fireside, in weather permitting, in Brooklyn on September 15th at the Barrow's Intense Tasting Room in Industry City. That's in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. It's a fabulous space. There will be craft cocktails available. I'm going to be chatting with Evie a lot like we're talking now. There's going to be an opportunity for a question and answer with the audience. You're going to do a reading from 3 days in the Pink Tower. And then afterwards, you're also going to be sticking around, I think, and signing books, right?
Yeah.
Copies.
Absolutely.
And people can pre-order their copies on the event page. If they go to Ghost Stories by the Fire, EV Night on Eventbrite, you can go ahead and get a free RSVP. You can order your copy of 3 Days in the Pink Tower in advance so that you are 100% guaranteed to walk out of the event with a signed copy from Evie herself. And I just can't wait to have you. I can't wait to talk about this more. I think you're an incredibly gifted novelist. You're an incredible writer. You're an incredible human. For like I've said before, a lot of people, it's easy to get bitter. It's easy to get angry. It's easy to go dark when horror is visited upon you.
Yeah.
And you turned around and did exactly the opposite. And you opened up yourself, your heart, your soul, the whole experience, so that all of us can walk through what you've been through into not only more empathy for what it means to just be human, but also for all of us who've been there, who've been through something like that, can say, us too. It is a me too, but it's all of us too. It is
all of us. We're all together. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. So we gotta help each other out.
I'm just so grateful for you, for your book, for your work, for just your energy. And I can't wait to see you.
I know, I cannot wait.
Thursday. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Evie Knight. Thank you for publishing. And we'll see you next week, Evie.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.